Graphics' role in elections is all about presentation primarily, so it's data integration from the results system, the results providers, providing then the interfaces into the graphic systems. So primarily about UI, processing of data, presentation rules about which parties that should be represented, rounding rules so that numbers look sensible, and provide a fluid, easy to use user interface to allow producers and operators to get graphics to air. The first thing we'll receive from the BBC are graphics bibles. They're basically outline specification documents detailing what graphics are required for each particular service. So we'd receive a separate specification document for touchscreen and for low thirds and full-form graphics and for VR. We'll build those interfaces based on those specification documents. We'll liaise with design department within the BBC and the graphics department who are designing the graphics. And as election day nears, we'll hold a series of workshops where all the producers can come and look at work in progress, examine the graphics, see how they're working, making sure that we're delivering what they've asked us for. The data arrives from a third-party results provider. They're sent directly into our Ignition server through a REST API, so this is using web technologies. So they come in over a standard REST API port on port 80. We then process those results and store them inside our Ignition database. Okay, for something like a flash or a tally, these are things which update in real time. If it takes more than a second, we've got real problems. So we would expect within half a second, perhaps, of an updated scoreboard for our tally, to getting that tally onto the air, so direct to viz, straight in and straight out. And that's obviously incorporating all the presentation rules that we have to apply about which parties we represent and the rounding and all of those things. So we have to be very quick. We talk directly to Viz Engine, so we're sending commands from our Ignition server software directly to many Viz engines, so that's for full forms and lower thirds, however many Viz renderers are required for VR. On top of that, then we have a layer of script running inside of the Viz engine. So there it's responsible for primarily transition logic within the scene, so we can move cleanly from one scene to the next. And again, this applies to lower thirds, tallies and name straps, up to VR and transitioning between different graphics within VR. The touchscreen, again, it's written very much like an application within Viz Engine. So there are various hit targets within the scene using a script plugin. And again, the touchscreen communicates back to our Ignition server through the REST API. So we've implemented a layer within Vizrt that generates HTTP requests, which are sent back to our Ignition server, which return the correctly formatted data and commands to operate the touchscreen. Alongside that, Emily Maitlis has a hint screen. So as she navigates around the touchscreen, a secondary system will provide hints to her on a plasma that's just within her eye line, providing background information on each constituency as she works around the touchscreen. Okay, this is a first for the BBC use of social media within elections. So again, it's within the touchscreen. So there's a social media producer who sits next to Emily Maitlis' producer. Within Ignition, with the Ignition software, she can set up a number of queries and return a live stream from the Twitter API. So again, we're interfacing directly with the Twitter API. From there, she can stack tweets from Twitter. She can compose additional comments. So this is not just a comment coming from the Twitter stream, it's manually input comments. And then associated with each comment, we can have a high-res image and designations and names for presentation on the touchscreen. Within Ignition, using the same application, we can allocate different screens to different roles. So the full forms, there are 3-4 roles there. So there's someone obviously transmitting them, that's the key part. As they're transmitted, it's just worth mentioning, within David Dimbleby's desk, there are 2 monitors, which again are driven by Ignition, which give him a clue as to the next graphic that's coming up, and a good, easy-to-read representation of the current graphic. Then there's another role who's stacking relevant results for offering up to the full form transmission role. There's another role who's inputting quote graphics, assembling quote graphics, and again offering them to the transmission role. So that's full forms, and then of course for lower thirds there's someone operating flashes, the tally, name supers, both input and output, headline straps, and then again back in the touchscreen world, Emily's producer has a screen where she can build lists of interesting councils for Emily to navigate to, and then of course we mentioned social media, the graphics producer within the VR area and the director all have the same application. So the roles that they get is that's driven from an administration screen within Ignition, so we can allocate any role to any particular operator. Ben Watt, who's the graphics producer, he sets up the sequences of graphics for use within a particular VR hit. The director will obviously cue them and make sure they're ready. Jeremy Vine has a clicker which steps through that sequence of graphics. So again, the clicker interfaces through a GPI interface directly into our Ignition server to cue the graphics on. Jeremy Vine's producer has a screen where, again, much like the touchscreen, you can add hints and tips for each graphic, so that when Jeremy clicks through each graphic in turn in a plasma or several plasmas within his eye line, he's got background information on each graphic. Essentially, we're there to make life as easy as possible for the BBC, so that encompasses both the production staff, the editorial staff, the design staff, and then of course not to forget, when it comes to infrastructure, as you've looked at these this afternoon, there's a lot of infrastructure required to deliver an action programme. So again, we work hard with the BBC's technical project management staff to ensure that the correct infrastructure is in place for what we require. So we work very, very closely with project managers as well.